everyone, and welcome to the AWS Developers Podcast. I'm co-hosting today. My name is Brooke Jamison. I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS. I am co-hosting with Dave. Say hey to the podcast, Dave.
Hey, podcast.
And we are joined by Fei Yuan and Aleatha Parkerwood, who are both principal engineers with Amazon DataZone. So, Fei, you can go first, and then Aleatha after that. What's the most exciting part of 2023 for you so far?
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke and Dave. I'm really excited about this data zone, and we just went GA on October 5th. So
Congrats.
Yeah.
it is. I think this has been teams have been working together for a long time, and we're really excited about it. So a little bit introduction about myself. As Brooke mentioned, I'm a principal engineer in Amazon. I am on the data zone team, and my responsibility is to lead the design implementation of it with product and tech teams. So before that, I've been with Amazon for 8+ years, and I think this is useful for the data zone because I built various systems and projects related with data, ML, in selling partner services, retail, Amazon business payments, and even cryptocurrency and IDM, Alexa AI. And the interesting thing here is that when I look at all these projects in the past, they all require some kind of data discovery, consuming, data producing, and then whether you run an ETL jobs or using our exabytes of distributed data lakes or generate offers and things like that, they all use data. It's very important. And then here, this is a really good opportunity for us because we can address this problem space, making all this solution work together, whether it's analytical ML together. And then also, I'm pretty happy that now I can go back to my previous teams and tell them, hey, you have DataZone, you can use it to help you to manage your data and etc. So here, that's why we are here. Thank you.
So good. Yeah, and back to you, Aleatha. What's the most exciting part of 2023 for you so far?
I think there are two things in 2023 that have been amazing for me. One of them has been the DataZone launch. I'm so excited to be here to watch it come across the finish line. And the other thing that's been very exciting for me has actually been being moved into the DataZone team. So the team that I was working on joined the DataZone team pretty late in the game. I'm very excited for, getting to work with this amazing team, getting to realize this great vision for being able to manage and govern data. So a little bit about my background as well. So I came into Amazon about 3 years ago as actually the principal privacy engineer for Amazon devices. So my background was in privacy and data governance, and I spent a lot of time working with teams that needed access to data to do their jobs, making sure that people had the right access at the right times to the right things. I've also been on the other side of the table. I did a long stint working in machine learning and AI, ran a machine learning research lab for a couple of years. So I've also been on the other side of the table saying, please just give me access to the data. I just need the data that I need to do my job, and I need to understand what it is and where it came from. So I think DataZone is so exciting for me because as both somebody who manages data and somebody who has used data a lot over the past, I think this is such a cool set of tools, and it's going to make people's lives so much easier.
Yeah, I worked in machine learning consultancy firm in the leadership team before I came to AWS. And I think data governance was something that I had the most conversations about, even though the conversation started talking about machine learning and they went back to talking about governance in so many cases. Do either of you have any good points? We were talking earlier about the problem space that you're exploring as part of DataZone. Is there any really big problems for users that stand out that were big motivations for why DataZone exists and then how it solves those for customers?
If I were to think about it, there's a few problems for the customers are facing. The first problem is about being able to find their data, being able to catalog, being able to find their data across different for example, places or different systems, different accounts, and that has been pretty challenging. And also allowing different teams to work together in a way that's more of a distributed fashion. That's something that takes challenge. And then on top of that, once you know where the data is, being able to access them in a controlled fashion and understanding who can access what and at what purpose, That's another challenge. And then from there, that how do you integrate that? So even though you say you can access it, but there are different tools out there. Different AWS already have a lot of tools. There's also other tools on analytics ML. How do you get the access into the tools that's integrated with what you want to do? So a lot of these having people to try to put a solution together, or understanding different tools, and making user to go through this complicated setup or control, that's pretty hard. So the main challenge is really we need a better distributed data mesh product that can handle this end-to-end experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about DataZone as a product is that people have a bunch of different tools that they use for different reasons, different needs. We have a database for every work, every use case under the sun. But I love that DataZone gives you sort of a unified set of abstractions to take that whole pile of data and users and tools and bring them all together in a way that's easy to understand, easy to manage, easy to know who's getting access to what. So I think regardless of whether you're trying to get access to data or share data or manage the people who are accessing data, I think there's something for everybody here.
Yeah, I love that. So when I was writing code every day, and I started out, my main job actually was in pharma. And there was a lot of things with FDA regulation, like CFR 11. And if I messed something up, like if I was distributing packages, this is Microsoft through SMS, if I hit a machine that was doing FDA trials, I could invalidate millions of dollars of worth of research, right? And so as a
Mm-hmm.
developer, I was so nervous about what are these concepts? Like, what should I have access to? What am I allowed to touch? I know what I could do as far as code, but I'm not sure what data I have access to and if I'm hurting anything, if I'm benefiting anything. And so for the developers that are listening to this and they're dealing with that problem every day, what are the new concepts here? What are the problems, the features, and like how does DataZone address those problems for developers?
Well, why don't we do a high level overview? Maybe Fei, you can take that, and
Yeah.
then I can start with a deep dive into the foundational layer, which is the catalog. Go ahead, Fei.
Right. I think you're touching upon the new concepts, how we address these problems. So there are at least four concepts that we'll probably talk about in this podcast, and there are more that we can talk about more in the future.
Yeah.
So the first one is catalog, and I kind of mentioned about it. How do you get the data together? And then especially when you have different places of the data coming in different accounts and different system produced or human. And the second one is about project. Project is a concept that we're really pushing because a lot of time when people are accessing, there is a missing element about why are you accessing the data, for what intention, the business use case. That part is missing. So we'll talk about a little bit more and why that matters. And then the third piece is environment. So environment, remember we talked about there's different tools out there. AWS itself already has a lot of tools, analytics, EMR, Redshift, Athena, all those tools. And then on the ML side, there's SageMaker. There's also quite a few others. So how do you get these tools wiring them together and getting the right, have the project be able to work on this environment? That's a third concept that we'll talk about. And then the last one is about access. I'm not sure if people have thought about this. Just having a catalog out there is not enough. You can find things, but then and what do I do? Do I make a call to the person who owns the data, asking the person to please give me access, or change IAM policy, change something here and there? And that is, first of all, it's pretty tedious. Second, it's pretty hard to control. So DataZone has that concept, whether it's catalog or project environment, to have the access fulfilled throughout the entire system. So those are the main four concepts that we'll go through today. Lida.
Sure. So I can take it from there. So let's spend a little time talking about the foundation of DataZone, which is the catalog. DataZone is based on a data mesh architecture. So we recognize that data is in certain stores and certain systems for a reason. and you would rather not move it around just to be able to discover or to manage it. So data stays resident in the places, the accounts, the data stores where it should be, and then DataZone is responsible for stitching those different data sources together into a catalog so that people can discover what data is out there. They can find data to do their jobs. We talk about things like reducing time to insights, making sure people can find and use what they need. So at the heart of DataZone is this catalog, which takes in data from many different AWS accounts. We call these data sources. And then once the data is brought into the catalog, you can then enrich that with a bunch of additional business context. So we offer things like metadata forms, which will allow you to apply business terms to your data. You can say, this is a sales data set. This contains marketing data. This contains personal data. So you can really richly annotate the data so you understand what it is, how it's appropriate to use it, and what sorts of access control might apply to it, for example. And because we know doing this manually is a really huge pain point for customers, we also do things like automating business name generation. So as you bring your data into the catalog, we can actually automatically enrich it using machine learning and give you a human readable description of a data column. People who develop schemas aren't necessarily thinking about somebody who doesn't understand the data set. And so we can do things like taking CID and saying, okay, this is a customer ID. We understand what this is. And so we can help you understand the data set, annotate it, bring it in, and then make it available for sharing and consumption.
Yeah. How is this related to the Glue catalog and technical metadata? And as someone who has such experience in privacy and data, how do you define that? It's for people who don't know, at Amazon, we go through a lot of training around what defines these different pieces of privacy. What is a person's name, a person's email, how does that relate into this? Because I feel like as a developer, you're constantly thinking about, what am I accessing, and is there any kind of layers that separate this, that kind of protects me so I don't have to worry about that? How does that all integrate, and what is your view on those areas?
Yeah, great questions, both of them. So let me take the Glue one first. So Glue technical metadata and the Glue catalog is really intended for programmatic consumption. You're looking at things like data types. You're like, this is a number, this is a string. What can I do with this particular piece of data? But it doesn't tell you anything about the contents. It doesn't tell you anything about the semantics, the use cases. It doesn't tell you if this string is an email address or if it's a person's name, or if it's an entire book. So you really need another semantic layer on top of that to help you understand the data so that you can actually make use of it, and so you know what uses are appropriate. So I think one of the great things about DataZone is that because we have this nice and rich catalog, you can start to apply a lot of these semantic classifications that people need to use for data governance purposes. You can say this table contains personal data, and because it contains personal data, here's an access control policy that says if you haven't gone through personal data training, you can't touch this table. So that's the kind of really powerful constructs you can get once you actually have some notion of the semantics of the data. So it's really helpful, and then you can layer other types of governance over the top of that, even to understand how it should be handled, what sorts of processes it should be subject to. So it's super powerful.
Do you think there's any big misconceptions about DataZone as a service, given that there are so many analytics and so many different types of data services on AWS? Do you think there's a big misconception about how it fits in or what it does?
That's a really interesting question. I think there are a lot of different analytics services. I think it depends on which angle you're coming in from. We do certainly get a lot of questions about Glue Data Catalog, for example. Why is this not Glue Data Catalog? I think as we go through some of the other concepts, we'll touch on some of the things that are similar and why this is helpful or why this layers over the top of it. Like I think we'll talk about, for example, how this relates to lake formation, which, people love lake formation. We're going to talk about access control. And people ask us rightly, like, okay, well, lake formation does access control. Why do I need DataZone? So I think we'll get to that towards the end.
I think if I were to just maybe quickly summarize the answer to your question, Brooke, is just that there's always an integrated solution. It was an integrated solution that's also the main part of it is the end user facing. So instead of only asking the cloud engineers to put things together and then develop another solution, because I think a lot of enterprise or company, they have to do that anyway. I mean, they have to do that before DataZone is in place. So we really want to provide that type of solution, integrated system for our end users and wiring these things together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The really interesting thing about DataZone is, in some cases we have multiple services that sort of overlap and do the same thing. In this particular case, I think DataZone, I think more of as like a coordination layer or an abstraction layer. So it doesn't take away the need for lake formation necessarily. It just makes it easier to work with lake formation. It makes sure that the right permissions are landing in the right places, for example. Or, it leverages Glue Data Catalog and then pairs that with semantic metadata. So it's really, I would say it's beautifully complementary to almost all of the other services that we have. And in most cases, our whole goal is to make it easier to work with each of those analytics services. I think Fei alluded earlier to things like Athena and SageMaker. So the whole goal is to make our lives easier as data consumers in each of these services, or as data producers, data stewards.
Yeah. I think sometimes people think user experience is like what color a button is or how a website looks or something, but this seems to be a great example of what user experience looks like when your users are data consumers. Just this layer you can add on that helps that integration so people can collaborate a little bit easier. And on the collaboration, the C word, it's just, I think people get scared of governance as a word because it sounds scary to them. But in most cases that I've seen, governance is all about making collaboration possible and more scalable. Can anyone talk me through how that governance works to enhance collaboration within DataZone and maybe step by step what that process would look like?
Okay, so Aleatha went through the catalog. That was the first thing, and the second thing is the project. And the way we think about this is that you without project, for example, today you can give permission to people, to users, to groups, and then the problem with that is exactly what Brooke you were asking about. It's very difficult for people to collaborate because I can bring in some permission. I can access these three buckets or these glue tables, and then Lita will have access to another two, or maybe she doesn't. Then how do I give data to her, or how does she give data to me one way or another? We don't have equal access to the same thing that we need to collaborate on, right? Even though we're working on the same thing. And that's one. And that often leads to people just give everything to everyone. And that is not a very good idea, especially when you're working on a project that have maybe different rules, different regulations, because essentially you are over permissioning. Over permissioning means you can think about, I come to a room, and this room is supposed to deal with maybe healthcare data. And the moment you enter the room, you should not have access to other data. You should only be accessing data as everyone else in the same room. And that's the way that we should think about it. So project is providing this type of role. It has two things. One is that project is a bundle of resources. You have a list of maybe tables, assets, data that the project has access to. And then the second thing is that project has a bunch of people that work together. And the moment that people come in here, it's acting as a role. So you're coming in, and then you are only assuming or taking this project. That's your intent. That's your context of working on things. That's how we're putting the permission together. It helps with collaboration, reduce single point of failure, and it does a bunch of things. But it does take some effort for people to understand that when people are working on projects, they need to think about this as a context instead of just as an individual personal level.
Yeah, so it's funny. Me always being a developer. My brother he's worked for Gartner, director over there, and he was always the security person. So for me, it's admin access on everything. And as far as he's concerned, I only have access to Notepad. And it's that constant battle. And so I super appreciate you for kind of breaking that out, right? So from what I'm hearing you say, a project, so it's this bundle of resources, it's the business intent, it's an intent versus what my organization might look like, right? And you're looking at avoiding that cross contamination. How does that tie into environment? So like developers are listening to this and they're like, how is this different from Redshift, Athena? How are you constraining things, and how does that map back to the project when I'm looking at environment?
Okay, so the environment project that I talked about, we have not touched about any physical resources so far, right?
Right.
Because project we're thinking about this is a logical container of resources, but it does not. People cannot do too much unless they have some tools to interact with it. So environment is the place where now I have a project, now I have the resources, now I have the data asset that project have subscription, for example, entitlement to those access entitlement. But then people need to interact with it. So they do need to, for example, spin up an Athena environment, Athena query to be able to query the data assets that as a member of the project, you have access to. So
Right.
that's pretty useful, right? And also now if you want to run some maybe Redshift, run some other queries, then you spin up another environment that environment, you use that environment to access, to interact or consume or produce whatever the assets that pertain to this project. So it is really the place that you do things there. And of course, we have more concepts behind, such as you probably see from the documentation that there's blueprints behind. Blueprints is the one that tells you how the environment should be constructed. And then we at GA we are launching Redshift, we launch Athena, and in the future we'll launch more, and we'll also allow customers to bring their own.
Yeah, Aleatha, you must have some perspectives on this from an access and security perspective as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I think Fei sort of alluded to this under projects, and I think it is one of the more powerful, and one of the other very powerful aspects of DataZone is that the catalog that I mentioned earlier is just a metadata layer. So you don't have data access. You're able to see you're able to see the structure of the data, you're able to see metadata about it, but to actually go and get access to it, you need to request access, and you need to request access for a project and an environment where it makes sense for you to have that access. So access control policies in DataZone are super, super rich. We can do a lot to say what types of data you're allowed to access, what purposes data is allowed to be used for. We are working on increasingly rich, first role-based and then attribute-based access control, and we are always working to integrate deeper and deeper with lake formation. So, we try to take advantage of all of the access control constructs under the hood. So really the ultimate goal is the project and the environment define what you're going to have access to, and then there's a whole bunch of nitty gritties around access control that nobody loves. I've heard people say you need a PhD just to use IAM. So
If
we take
someone
care
loves access management and IAM, please send us a note to the podcast on the show notes page because we want to hear from you.
No, everyone loves IAM. It is the easiest of our tools to use. That's what I hear. Anyway, so DataZone takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting around access control. So project and environments define what you can get access to, and then we actually do a lot of work under the hood to manage grants and entitlements for projects and environments. So you can just get access to data. You don't have to fuss around. You don't have to go find an IT admin to give you the grant. DataZone takes care of all of that mess for you. And
Nice.
It can also, when the project ends, you can tear the access down so you don't have problems like baselining, and which, again, like everybody loves doing baselining.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point that what Aleatha talked about. I think we usually think about access with DataZone in three layers. So the first layer is we call it access agreement. That's where you set up your policies about what type of what line of business, what type of projects can access what kind of data assets. And data assets, you can also specify whether it's in Europe or in North America or that type. So essentially, you just have some kind of agreement at a very business oriented policies that you set. And then the second level, we call it access entitlement. That's where DataZone also handles that. It will inject, it will fulfill the actual access, maybe configurations or access entries in the data system, such as late formation grants. So it's taking from the access agreement that the business user set on the top, and then will fulfill to the lower level. And that level actually goes back to the environment. Remember I talked about environment. When you come to environment, probably people know, unless you configure the environment role or the principle of the environment, you cannot access anything unless you give a star. That what Dave is doing. What prefer to do is one person.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Everybody gets everything.
I remember,
Yeah.
yes.
Music to Dave's ears.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I think it's
coming from, I did the chief evangelist role in Alexa for 6 years, and we started using Lambda as a way to create Alexa skills, and IM became a huge barrier. And I can't tell you how many times exactly what you're talking about. It's like, what permissions do I give this? If it's not full, like, what do I do? And so this is music to my ears. I love
That's right.
this, to be able to just
That's
come
right.
in and up. It's taken care of.
That's exactly right. That's right. Just like, for example, Alita gives a data asset permission to Dave, and Dave is using a Athena query, Athena environment. But what does the give mean? It really should be translated into the role that Dave is using in Athena or the work group automatically now has access to only to the assets that Alita has given to this project. So that's the second layer of access entitlement. And then last layer is more of an individual tools and NLP tools and ML tools, where they will use the entitlement in late formation or IAM and then enforce during the query time, during the data retrieval time. So those are the three layers of access that DataZone covers.
Mm-hmm. And I think the interesting thing about that top layer, that access agreement layer, is that historically you've given access to Dave. You're like, Dave, you specifically get access to the store. But instead you can say, Dave, why don't you join this project? We're going to be working on a podcast together. You get access to all of the resources that we're all using.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you're not, and your data governance person says, okay, Dave can have access to this because he's an Amazon full-time employee. So governance doesn't have to think about Dave. Dave, you don't have to get explicit permissions. You just say, I'm working on a project and I have permissions to join it. And then all of your data access flows right along with it.
I love that. It's mapping back to projects from our environment, and our access is kind of integrated within that and then enforced through that lens.
Exactly.
Just mapping back to real life. That's the thing, because it makes more sense, because if you're working in a team, you're saying, oh, we're in a team doing this. So it's bringing out, this is why I think it's a user experience tool more than a data tool for most things. It's just bringing it back to how people actually do their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I had written on my notebook before we started, which we haven't really talked about yet, is the word extensibility. So I guess for developers and engineers who are building on AWS, what opportunities does the DataZone API and extensibility provide for them?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working towards is giving users the ability to define their own custom asset types. So we know that, data has different use cases. There are different types of annotation you might want to apply to it. There are different ways you might want to bring that data into the catalog. So we want data owners to be able to define and explain what the type of their data is, so we can give them the richest possible cataloging experience. So I think that's one of the interesting points of extensibility.
Yeah, and then the other ones, some of them are still being developed. We'll provide more details in the future. We talked about environments and then the blueprints, right? Because you need some kind of blueprints that helps you to define the environment type.
Right.
And today we have Redshift, we have Athena. In the future, we'll have more. and we'll also allow the engineering teams on the customer side to be able to define their own. And today we have event based, so that you can roll out your environment and then send us events, and then DataZone will then provide the access fulfillment with your environment. But I think this will just you can see that you can expect that there will be more and more extensibility on this part, and then that also applies to subscription or access fulfillment. If you have a different system outside of DataZone, but you still want to have enjoy the entire catalog or access agreement, then we can federate to other systems in the future to be able to do the access fulfillment.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I love all this information. And what I want to know from you, what is the one thing that, like, advice that you could give any organization looking to improve, governance, access control? Now is your chance. We've got all these people listening. What do you want them to know before they're in the console?
Oh my gosh. Where would I start?
Right.
I think coming in from the data governance and privacy side, I would say that one of the biggest pain points I have seen customers express over and over and over again is just the challenge of staying on top of what you have, where it is, what's happening with
Right.
it, who has access to it. So I think the fact that DataZone allows you to do an inventory of your data, to do some of this annotation work automatically, which is such a manual nightmare today, and then to be able to do these access grants, bundle people together so it's a lot easier to understand who has access to what, and to manage the grants, and as people leave projects, take them away. So I think it's just, there are so many bits of manual work that people have to do today to manage data access, and I feel like DataZone just makes it so much easier. But I would say, don't underestimate the human element. Like, don't underestimate if you're a CIO or a CISO. Don't underestimate how much manual work people are doing today just to keep you in compliance or to make your data sharing use cases work. Like,
Yeah. And that's all time they could be spending doing something innovative or different. It's
yes.
Yeah.
I always say that data governance is a tax on your business. Like, you absolutely have to pay your taxes. Like, don't skimp on your taxes, but if you can find ways to reduce your burden, that's something that you can invest in your future instead of overhead. So do it like, take advantage of the tools that are available to you.
Yeah, and I'll add to that is that human in this part of the equation is the hardest thing. Anytime you deal with human in the system, so I think I would recommend our listeners to, when you are planning out your data strategy in your organization, try to automate as much as you can, using policies, using authorizations, policies, reduce manual work, because we have, we have been to many businesses, a lot of big teams or projects, and we can see that even you can, for example, you can set the best approval system out there or have people to go through, but the moment you set up, people at the end of the day will just say, oh, whatever, I will just approve, or just give access to everything.
Yeah.
So it has to
I
be.
love that.
That's right. That's what needs to start at the end.
No, my favorite thing about especially developers, but humans in general, is that they will find the easiest way to do something. So if the easiest and most convenient opportunity is just to
Right.
smash the approve button, that maybe won't end up the best long term.
Yeah. And it's Emily Freeman, yes, she has this book, DevOps for Dummies. And one of the things I really love, which she focuses on, is that your target is human beings. Like, human beings are beautiful, but we're all over the place, and sometimes we're chaos. And I love that you point that out too. Is, don't forget, at the end of the day, you're not dealing with an algorithm, you're dealing with human beings. And exactly what Brooke said, is, I may take a shortcut. I may try and figure out, I need to get this done, and I'm not going to follow this policy. So however you can automate that is beautiful. So thank you for pointing that out.
Right. Like good UX is just making it easy to do the correct thing. Like that's what good UX is. Anytime you're having to fight with it, it's like I always used to tell people if they're doing something weird with pivot tables in Excel, there's almost definitely a better, more streamlined way to do that at scale. Like anytime people are fighting to try and do the correct thing, that's not going to work out. So that's why I really like from this perspective how streamlined it makes it across, especially with all the integrations, so people can actually do the right thing. I guess we started the podcast asking what you were most excited about, what's already happened this year. But to end on the same note, I guess, what are you both excited about leading into the end of 2023 and maybe even 2024?
I think to me, this is just the beginning. This is the beginning. We are really excited that the Amazon AWS we have launched this DataZone product, and then there's so much more that we will do. We will do to help our customers. So I'm really excited that this is there, and also I'm part of the team to see this happen.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely plus one to that. I think I'm really excited to see a lot of the data governance features mature. I'm excited to hear how it's landing with customers and what the next big thing is that we can do to make their lives easier. So cannot wait to hear how things are landing and start building the next tranche of features. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah. For the developers that have listened to this and decided they wanted to get started learning DataZone and figuring out how they can integrate it with everything else they're running, do you have any great starting points for them, how they can get started learning more?
I hear we have a lovely website on AWS.
Yes,
We
I'll
are
add that to the
GA.
show notes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I would say absolutely dive into the show. I think there are some really nice video starters, and of course, uh, I'm always happy to hear directly from customers. So I would love it if folks are interested. They're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please just you can find us probably on LinkedIn, and then if you have questions or general thoughts, suggestions, and your use case, we're really happy to hear and then incorporate them because we can make things happen, we can make changes. So we really want to get all your feedback and see how we can improve it.
Yeah, this is a thing I tell to so many builders when I meet them at conferences. Like lots of times you hear companies say, "Oh, let us know if you have any questions." But we actually 100% mean it. I have an AMA that's
Oh
open all
yeah.
the time, and people's questions from there directly, that's how I make content because I find if someone's asking this question, it can't be the only person. So if
Yeah.
you're looking at the docs maybe and there's something that you don't know how that's going to work with maybe the access management your company uses or something else that you think is a weird edge case, it's actually probably not a weird edge case. So definitely reach out to Fei and Aleatha on LinkedIn if you have specific questions because you never know, you might not actually be the only one thinking about it. So it's super helpful.
Yeah, and I'll add that to the show notes. And I always feel a little guilty doing stuff like this because I'm taking you away from building products. So thank you. Congratulations on the release of this. Super appreciate your time for being able to explain this and for developers to understand that we're all people. Like you're building these things, you understand pain points. It's not a faceless, just part of Amazon. You actually want to see this continue to iterate and really help solve problems for people every day that are working with data. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Absolutely, it's been such a pleasure. It's been so nice talking to both of you. So
Thank you, Brew and Dave. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
Brooke,
Thanks so much.
let's hear the bye. Let's hear it.
Oh, I have to do this every
Do
episode.
it. Do it.
Bye.